Hello everybody, my name is Magnetico and welcome to my series of videos where we take video game systems, we clean them up, repair them if need be, and sometimes we mod them. And today we're going to be taking a look at a system that was in third place during its generational run. Now though, it is very much a sought after system and contains some of those expensive games in the retro gaming community. I'm of course talking about the Nintendo GameCube. Now, I am not a stranger to this particular system. I did buy one back in the day when I was younger because I wanted to play Resident Evil, the remake, and Resident Evil 0, and Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, and Eternal Darkness, and The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker. So many games that are still exclusive to this little system, but luckily, other ones have moved on to HD versions so other people can play those wonderful games as well. This particular GameCube I got off eBay for about $50. It didn't contain any cables or controller, and the disk drive did not work. So we definitely will be putting that to the test as well. This console is also kind of dusty, so we definitely will have to be doing the cleanup on it. But one of the other things I was looking for with this particular system was the actual digital out. Now, the only version of the GameCube that contains that is the DOL 001. Any version after that, they actually took that digital signal and went with AV as well, which is totally fine back in the day. But now in this digital age, we want to get the crispiest signal from our GameCube, and digital out is the one that we're looking for. It is missing one of the port doors up here, so we definitely will have to replace that. And one of the cool things that the seller threw in, or they forgot that it was in the GameCube, was a game, which is we're going to be using for testing. And this game is in pretty good shape, and it is Harvest Moon: Another Wonderful Life. So we have a game to test, which is good. We're going to put this to the test just to see if it works or not, and if it doesn't, that's totally fine. Again, I have a plan when it comes to this, of how many episodes I'm going to make and what I'm going to be doing in those episodes, so stay tuned for those. If this is your kind of thing where somebody goes through and cleans up systems, repairs them if need be, and sometimes mods them, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you're notified every time I post a video. Let's get started. So it looks like it didn't load straight into the game, unfortunately. So it looks like it's not even reading the disk. So let me go ahead and open the lid and then close it back up. All right, it looks like there's a question mark there. It looks like it's trying to read the disk at this point. But yeah, no disk. So it doesn't look like it's going to work just like the eBay seller described. And that's okay. Let's go ahead and get started with the cleaning. The items you're going to need is going to be the GameCube system. You're going to need a screwdriver set, and I'll go ahead and link these items in the description below. You're going to need some thermal pads because we will be replacing the ones that are currently in the system. Some port doors in case you're missing any on your GameCube. Isopropyl alcohol, I use 99%. Q-tips and a toothbrush. So with our GameCube system in hand, we're going to go ahead and turn this guy around. And as you can see, I am missing one of the ports, and that is called the speed port. I do have the other ones. You can buy these on eBay as like a triple pack, which is kind of nice. And to take off the 4 screws at the bottom of the GameCube, you will need a specialized game bit, is what it's called, screw. It is included in the screwdriver set that I include in my description below. So once you remove those 4 screws, you can actually lift up the lid. But before I do that, I want to make sure I take out any games that are inside. And here is the free game that we got with this GameCube, which was Harvest Moon. Now we can take off the lid. And I was actually really impressed by this system and how compact it is. But before we look at it, let's look at the top here. And it's incredibly dusty and incredibly dirty. So we definitely are going to have to put some work into this system for sure. But looking back at the GameCube here, it is such a compact system. I'm actually really impressed by how it looks. Like, I'm amazed. I've never been inside a GameCube system before. So let's go ahead and tear it down. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take off this piece of plastic in the back. The next thing we're going to do is remove these 5 screws on the side. If you guys remember the Nintendo 64, it was held down by a billion screws, so this one is no different. But the cool news is that you can actually put all these screws together. Most of these screws are the exact same bit size. So I will tell you when they're different, but other than that, we can pile most of these screws into one giant pile and then just call it a day. We're going to take off these 2 screws in the back, and the other 2 screws left, they're kind of blocked right now by the CD drive and the fan, so we're just going to start working on the fan mount instead. As you can see, the fan mount also pretty dusty. We're going to take off 1 screw on each side of the fan mount, still the same size, so you can just pile those together as we have been. And now we're able to go ahead and lift up the entire mount. It's still connected by a little power cord, so we will have to remove that. So let's go ahead and unplug the little power cord, and the mount should be completely free. So again, looking at this fan is absolutely dusty. It will need some work done to it. So let's go ahead and put this aside for now. 3 screws are revealed once you remove the fan mount. Let's go ahead and take these off real quick. And now that we removed the fan mount, we can actually reach these other 2 screws that were being blocked initially. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and work on the front of the system, and these are actually different screws, so make sure you put these separately, but these are actually a smaller bit over by the controller port. So there's 4 of those. Let's go ahead and remove them. You can actually remove the front portion of the system right now if you wanted to. I didn't know that at the time. It's just going to fall off here in just a second. It's being held by a ribbon, but these small screws, just make sure you put those in its own separate pile, as you can see as I'm doing up there. And with the system facing me, we can go ahead and remove the front here. It's held by a single ribbon. Just make sure you pull it out gently. We're not going to work on this particular controller port area right now. We are going to work on it on the next video where we have to replace the battery. We're going to work on my mod section, but for now, we're just going to clean it up, make sure it's clean, and let's just put it aside for now. We're going to remove these little fragile pieces of metal. Make sure you put those somewhere safe. And now that all the screws are removed, we can go ahead and remove the CD drive. And this thing is gigantic. It's like almost the entire system here. They weren't messing around. So before we get to work on this, our issue here is this thing can't read discs. So, hopefully we're able to fix it. So let's put it aside for now. For now, we're going to go ahead and remove these 6 screws that hold down the heatsink. And these are different size screws as well. So make sure you put those in their own separate pile. We're not going to remove the heatsink right now. Once we do, it will ruin the thermal pads under them. Luckily, we did get new ones, but for now, we're just going to go ahead and remove the entire motherboard from the system itself. As you can see, I'm using a little bit of force here just to remove it. It was held down pretty tight. And this thing is just incredible. I am so impressed by this GameCube system. I didn't know the motherboard looked like this. Again, this is my first time working with one, and I am just amazed how much they were able to fit in such a small space. With the bottom of the system here with the shielding, we're going to take off these 4 screws. Again, these are the same size, so we're going to put them in our pile of similar screws. With those 4 removed, we're able to remove this metal shielding, which looks pretty clean, thankfully. We're going to go ahead and put that aside. A couple more metal shieldings here that we can just remove by pulling on them. Make sure you put those somewhere safe. And lastly, these 4 screws holding down this little power supply area, these are different sizes as well, so make sure you put those in their own little pile. But with 4 of those removed, we're able to remove the little power supply area. It does supply power to the system, but most of the power comes from the power block that comes with the GameCube, but it's still pretty neat to see this. So now we can go ahead and take this off. We will be cleaning this, and I'm going to put the metal shielding with all the other metal shielding parts that I've been piling up on the side of the screen here. So this leaves us with 3 little pieces here, metal pieces to take off. We're going to go ahead and take these out and put them aside. And that should leave us with just the bottom of the system. All plastic. We're going to definitely put these plastic pieces in some soapy water and clean them up. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take off or remove all the plastic from the lid as well. So lots of screws here. If you guys have watched me work with the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation, I don't really like working with lids that much. I think they're too complicated. So we're going to take off these 2 screws first, and that should let us remove the GameCube handle. Pretty neat. Yeah, I just think the way the lids work on these older systems is just It's just too complicated, but you know, it's still fun. Once you figure it out, it's all good. So we're gonna take off this right screw here and take off this little metal piece. We're also gonna take off this left screw, and this piece of plastic is held by a spring, so you kind of have to hold it down before you remove it. I'm gonna leave it there for now. We're gonna work on these two special screws here with the little, I don't know what you call it, the little washer. This is for the open button. So now I can go ahead and take off this plastic piece with the spring. I'm gonna put the springs in their own little area, but I'm gonna keep the plastic with the plastic pieces. This little gear kind of fell off to the side there. We'll figure out where that goes later. The open door spring, here's this one. You can remove the spring from this piece of plastic, so I will be doing that. But for now, we're just gonna put this aside. And with those screws removed, we're actually able to remove the lid. If you press these little prongs here, you're actually able to release the GameCube logo from it. A lot of people like to customize these. I think I'm just gonna try to buff this or clean this somehow so I can put it back together at the end. There are 2 more screws holding this whole top portion together, and these screws hold down this little clear piece of plastic that shows the power is on for the GameCube. So we're gonna make sure we clean this as well. The last bit to work on is we're going to take off the 3 buttons, the open button, the reset button, and the power button. If you press the prongs to start pulling on it, I sometimes use the screwdriver to push it all the way out so it's easier to remove. But as you can see on the sides, I mean, this thing is just completely dusty. So I will definitely be washing this with some soapy water and a toothbrush. So after this button here, there should be 1 left. These are a little bit troublesome. I definitely have to use the screwdriver, but we're gonna go ahead and pinch this. As you can see, my glove is just covered in dust. I mean, this thing is just dirty. Maybe the camera's not giving it or serving it any justice, but it is a dusty little system for sure. That's pretty much it. So we are done. Let's go ahead and wash these plastic pieces. So now that we have all the plastic pieces, we're going to put them all into some warm and soapy water one by one, and we will be cleaning them with a toothbrush or some kind of brush, but for now I'm just going to let the pieces soak, and then that way the soap starts working into some of that grime and some of that dust as well. But we will take the toothbrush and clean every piece one by one, even the little pieces. Again, just make sure there's no metal or any springs or anything that might still be in there. If you were following my video, there should be none of that in there, thankfully. We will let these air dry as we work on cleaning the other electronic parts. And one of the cool things that somebody mentioned in my Sega Saturn video is that you can actually use an air blower to actually dry these pieces, more specifically so you can dry the screw holes, which usually contain a lot of water. So here's our little power supply board, and I'm going to take my toothbrush and some isopropyl alcohol so I can go ahead and clean this up. It wasn't incredibly dirty, but if yours is, just make sure you take your time, make sure you use whatever you need, either the toothbrush or Q-tip, to get into some of those hard to reach spaces. And that holds true with this particular fan as well. Do as many passes as necessary until it's completely clean or until you're satisfied with it. Again, I used a toothbrush, isopropyl alcohol, and I didn't record this, but I actually went through every blade with a Q-tip and cleaned every one of those up until it was completely clean. Here is the controller port. This is not super dirty, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but I will take a Q-tip and clean all those ports. You guys should do the same. But here is the motherboard. Now this heatsink is a little hard to take off. I kind of have to wiggle it left to right, and once it loosened up, I was able to pry it from the motherboard. As you can see, all these thermal pads are completely ruined. They were pretty old, I'll be honest with you, but it looks like the middle one was the one that definitely received the most damage from me kind of removing the heatsink from the GameCube. So now I'm just gonna kind of take all this gunk. I mean, you can tell this stuff is old, so I am thankful that I went on eBay and purchased another set of thermal pads. You can also cut your own. I thought about doing the same thing, but I just thought it was easier just to buy them because they were like $8 and they were just offering them up in the exact sizes that they should be. So I went ahead and went that route. I will link that in the description below for you guys that want to go ahead and just buy a set. But as you can see from the video, I mean, this stuff is just old. It's just disgusting. So toothbrush, isopropyl alcohol, we're going to clean this motherboard completely. And the way to clean the actual chips where we took off the the thermal pads from is I'm going to take a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol and do as many passes as necessary until they're completely clean. It took me several passes to get all the dirt and all the residue from the thermal pad. So here I am cleaning the back of the system with a toothbrush and isopropyl alcohol, and we should be good to move on. Now it's time to work on the culprit, the CD drive that's not working. It looks pretty clean, it doesn't look too bad. There are 6 screws in the bottom of this structure that we have to remove, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. These are differently sized than any of the other screws, so make sure you put those in their own little separate pile. Once you remove all 6 screws, you are able to remove the structure from the shielding here. Kind of dusty, we'll clean that up. And what we're going to be focusing on to try to fix this GameCube is going to be this little pot right here. But before we do that, toothbrush and isopropyl alcohol. Make sure it's nice and clean. So with a multimeter, I'm going to go ahead and read the resistance on the pot under the disk drive for the GameCube. And it looks like we're sitting at about 480, I think is what I saw there, 485, which is pretty standard for a factory DOL 001 version of the GameCube. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. I did mess with this quite a bit before I got it to a certain point, but it looks like I got it down to about 380, 388. And that's where the disc started spinning a lot more and actually felt like I was getting a reading on that disc. So now it's time to put the GameCube back together. We're going to grab these metal pieces and put them into place. These are for the screws. There should be 3 of these, and I did end up cleaning them with a toothbrush and isopropyl alcohol before putting them back into place. There's also 3 metal pieces we got to put on the bottom shell, and they kind of just fall into place as well. Don't try to force them or anything. They're kind of, I don't know, they're kind of fragile looking, like they can bend easily, so I wouldn't put too much pressure on them. Again, they just fall into place. With this last one here, this is the one that goes with the little power supply, so we're going to put that into place as well. And finally, we're going to grab this little power supply that I was talking about and just kind of drop it into that little shielding there. Just make sure the screw holes line up. And I'm going to start working this wire on the outside of the shell as well, because remember, this one wire works its way all the way up to the fan. And once we have that in place, we're going to go ahead and screw it back together. Should be 4 screws. Now that we have that done, we can grab the metal shielding and go ahead and put that into place. You don't have to force this, it kind of falls into place as well. If it doesn't go down, just make sure you line up all the holes. And after we put that down, there will be 4 more screws that go into place. Finally, we can put the motherboard back into the shell itself. Again, it just drops into place. Don't add too much pressure. And we're going to take these thermal pads that we got from eBay and we're going to start putting this into place as well. I remember the gunk that we messed around with was pretty dirty, so I'm going to use this isopropyl alcohol and a cloth to kind of clean the residue off as much as possible. And we're going to peel off the bottom plastic from this thermal pad and we're going to put it into place here. Again, you're more than welcome to cut your own, but I thought it was just easier and it saved me some time just to buy it off eBay because I was buying a bunch of stuff for this GameCube anyway. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to go with the eBay option on this one. I kind of try to drop these in the middle just because whenever we put the heatsink on top, it is going to kind of squish them and kind of make them spread. So the more center they are, the better. So now that we have these all in place, I am going to remove the top plastic on these as well. So it's nothing but thermal paste now on the chips. This one here gave me a little bit of trouble, but I was able to remove it. So with the heatsink, we're going to go ahead and place it on top of the thermal pads. And again, we're not going to smash this in any way. Once we screw everything together, it should apply the pressure needed for these thermal pads. So for now, I'm just going to try to line up all the screw holes from the heatsink to the motherboard. And after that, let's go ahead and screw it down. Yeah, make sure it was nice and tight. And with this little brush, I'm just going to remove any extra dust I might have collected while I was working on this. so everything is nice and clean. Finally, we can put the disc assembly back into place. Again, this thing is huge. This takes up so much of the GameCube space that it's ridiculous, but it's pretty cool. I am going to start with the back of the system when it comes to screwing everything back together, and then I'm going to work on the side that does not have the fan. Should be 9 screws so far, 4 on the back and 5 on the side. Now we're going to start focusing on the fan side as well. So we're going to put these 3 screws here into place before we put the fan on. And look how clean this fan is. I spent a lot of time cleaning this. Again, you guys should definitely do the same just to make sure you have a nice clean system. And once we put this into place like so, we can go ahead and screw down the last 2 screws that go on the sides. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and plug in the power cord that we were kind of working with earlier. Go ahead and plug that in. Now we're going to work with the front of the system. These little metal pieces that were kind of fragile, that bend easily, we're going to put those into place. Just match the holes with the screw holes and you'll be fine. And this is where we take these little skinny screws and we're going to put these back into place. There should be 4 of these. Next, we're going to go ahead and flip the system around so the back of it is facing us. And we're going to grab this plastic plate that snaps into place. You don't have to screw this down or anything. We're going to go ahead and flip this to the side because we're going to grab the controller / memory card port and attach the ribbon to the system. Try not to bend the ribbon too much. It's not too bad, but once that's done, go ahead and snap this together and we can move this aside so we can start working on the top of the system. And we're going to go ahead and grab the lid and put it back into place. We're going to go ahead and flip this around. We're going to start working on screwing down all the little plastic pieces that we took off earlier. We're going to start with this one. This one is by far the easiest one to work with. So I'll show you guys a little bit of a close-up on how to set it into place. This one's not very hard. Once it falls into place, it's not too bad. You'll know it's nice and flush. So with that down, I'm going to go ahead and grab the screw and just kind of make sure this stays into place. The next part we're going to be working with, that's the one that gave me by far the most trouble. It took me several tries to get it down. But we're going to take this gear that fell out earlier, and there is a little slot for it right next to the other gear for the door. And these gears do work together. So once you drop it into place, it should be matching up with the other gear, like so. This is the part that gave me the most trouble. So we're going to take this plastic piece and we're going to grab the spring that came with it and put it into place like so. There should be the leg sticking out like that. Now the hard part about this, and I'm sure there's an easier way to do this, but the hard part about this is you have to put this into place with the spring compressed. And it was really hard to show you guys, so my hand will get in the way, but I will do a close-up here in just a moment of what it looks like. But yeah, the leg has to go in first, and then you'll compress the spring as you set the plastic piece down. As you can see, it is in place right now. Do not let it go, or otherwise it will flip and it'll fly across the room. So I'm going to go ahead and put the screw into place to hold it together. Here's a close-up here of what the final product should look like on the left side. As you can see, as soon as I let go of the door, it starts opening up automatically because of the spring. This piece of plastic, we're going to grab the other spring and feed the leg through this little slot. That should allow you to place the spring into place with the little leg sticking out. This is part of the mechanism that lets you open the lid or holds the lid closed. And you will have to press the leg against the GameCube wall and then set it down into place. Super odd design. I've said it many times, but again, I think these are just way too complicated. Grab the screw with the washer and go ahead and screw it down. And there should be another one that we have to put on the other hole for that plastic piece. Oh, I hit the top of the system by accident. Sorry about that. So with the other screw with the washer, That should complete the hardest parts about putting the top of the system back together, thankfully. Alright, so as you can see, the lid no longer opens. Pretty cool. We're going to grab this clear piece of plastic that shows the power is on. Just going to go ahead and slide that in there. It is held together by 2 screws. Again, everything from here on out, it's going to be pretty easy. Nothing's going to be as hard as the spring-loaded pieces of plastic we had to put together. This is for the GameCube handle. Make sure that the pillars line up. And it is held together by 2 screws, 1 on each side. One of the pieces that I forgot to mention throughout this video is this little dust catcher. I actually forgot it even existed, but it fell off. So I ended up cleaning it with some soapy water, very lightly with a toothbrush, and it turned out just fine. Now we're putting it back into place. We're going to flip the cover over and we're going to start working on the buttons. We're going to start with the open button first because I want to go ahead and test and make sure everything I put together is now working. Looks like everything's good. Next, we're going to put the reset button. Not much we can do about that one right now. And lastly, the power button. I'm kind of tempted to test the open button one more time just to make sure everything is working fine. So here we go. All right, looks good. We're going to grab the bottom portion of the system that we were working with earlier. And now we're going to go ahead and apply the lid. It should slide right in there, as you can see here, nice and flush. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. We're going to be putting in the 4 screws and the port covers. So screws first. And then next up, the port covers. I was missing the high-speed port, which is the one at the top. Again, I bought a triple pack on eBay that included all 3 that were OEM. At least that's what they claimed. And if they're not, I can't tell the difference. So everything looks pretty good. Lastly, we're going to put the Nintendo GameCube logo back into place. I didn't buff it, but we might work on that some other time. For now, good little GameCube. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we were able to completely clean our GameCube. It is now spotless and it is ready to go. Unfortunately, the only bad news is that I was not able to fix the disk drive. I actually went back in and actually disassembled the entirety of the disk drive assembly, and I re-greased it because that grease was looking pretty old, so the laser can move easier by the rails. And I actually looked through all the capacitors to see if any of them were kind of blown up or looked a little bit suspicious. There was one that was looking a little bit suspicious, but I think at the end of the day, one of 2 things might have happened to this system. One of the capacitors is completely gone and I would have to replace it. Number 2, the laser is completely burnt out. Whenever I messed around with the pot a little bit more and I put in a disc, it would read for quite some time. I'm talking like 30 seconds. That laser was working. It was working hard to try to read that game, but at the end of the day, it was not able to, even though there are times I thought that it would. So we were not able to fix it, but I'm not bummed out about it. We were able to fix the disk drive on the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation. So we were meant eventually to lose one of these. So it's not a big deal. Again, I do have plans for this GameCube, especially when it comes to optical drive emulators. Again, it was just for fun to see if we can fix it or not, as usual. If you guys had success fixing yours, congratulations. But this one, we're just going to go ahead and get rid of the actual disk drive and replace it with an ODE in a future video. If this is your kind of thing where somebody goes through and cleans up systems and repairs them and sometimes even mods them, make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you're notified every time I post a video. Thank you guys so much for joining me. More GameCube videos to come, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.